SECfans.com. Week 13 is ready to go. We're going to review a little bit of Week 12 first. We had 3 games that we talked about last week, and just wanted to touch on them real quick and then dive right into to the Week 13 action. Big week in college football. So before we do that, obviously I want to thank everybody for watching and listening each and every week. I want to thank my guest Husky Pup, who always comes back, whether his predictions are right or not. And to get into a right or not prediction, let's start out with Oklahoma, West Virginia. That one was interesting, considering the fact that somebody out of the two of us did say that was going to be a big win for Oklahoma. And you actually also predicted Oklahoma after giving me a little bit of, I don't know, maybe a little bit of sunshine for West Virginia. And it turned out that exactly what you said and what I said was going to happened. I think a little more on the point spread side favored my prediction, but it pretty much played out the same way both of us agreed. Oklahoma came out and it just looked like they had too much offensive firepower. And what I said in one of the comments on our previous video about it was that West Virginia is one of those teams who, even though they were facing a team that had a dramatic weakness in terms of Oklahoma's inability to really play good defense, they didn't have the offense to take advantage of it. And it was such a disjointed, or such a disparity there that they couldn't overcome the fact that Oklahoma's offense was going to overpower their defense. So why don't you give us a little insight into what we saw in this game and kind of where we go from here with Oklahoma?
Right. Anybody that watched this game and watched it ticked off saw that Oklahoma built up a huge lead, right? And West Virginia sort of clawed back to try to get into this game. But this was the first game where I felt like Oklahoma used the quarterback as a quarterback and used the running backs as running backs, right? We've seen repeatedly that Oklahoma was having more carries by Baker Mayfield than they were having Samaje Perine or Joe Mixon. Not a problem in this game. I mean, they only threw 15 passes in the ball game. And then Perine, 15 passes, 5 carries by Mayfield, 20 touches total. Perine and Mixon combined for 55 touches, rushing the ball, just rushing it. Average 5-6 yards per. We talk about a lot. Anytime you're over 4.5 per, you tend to be fairly successful. But if you can sustain those sorts of averages over 55 attempts, I mean, you're going to have a pretty ridiculous day running the football. And then on the other side, what I think is really interesting is on a broad game-wide sense, if you just look at the box score, West Virginia, in a lot of ways, outperformed Oklahoma. They had more total yards, a little bit lower yard per attempt, 7.1 to 11.3. But West Virginia averaged 10.2 yards per carry against Oklahoma in this game. The problem was way too much of it came in late, and West Virginia badly failed to sustain drives. I mean, that drive total, about 65 plays, was all that West Virginia managed to run. Oklahoma ran 80. And again, a lot of that was Oklahoma kind of trying to shut it down a little bit, run out the clock late. But for the most part, I mean, this was shocking for the Big 12. I mean, this was really a game dominated by the run for both teams, mixed in with occasional big pass plays by Oklahoma. But if you go back and you look at through, most of Oklahoma's big drives, West Virginia had a fumble on the first possession. Oklahoma gets the ball, and then they run it 6 times in a row and score. West Virginia goes 3 and out. Oklahoma gets it back, 75-yard touchdown pass. And when Oklahoma gets it back again, it's, what do we have here? 7 runs and 2 passes on the following drive. So, yeah, I mean, 14 runs and 3 passes on the first 3 drives by Oklahoma, and they're already up 21-0. And so that was kind of the deciding factor of the game, is how well both teams ran the ball. Oklahoma got up a big lead. West Virginia was down too much too fast, I think, for their defense to really compensate, and it just got away from them.
And a lot of people are going to say, West Virginia was thin at running back, which is true, and they didn't have Shell, which has been a bit of a mainstay for them. But he's really, except for a couple of games against Texas Tech and TCU, he's either been hobbled or ineffective this year. So I don't want to attribute this loss to not having Shell in the game, especially when they had so much more production in the running game, and it didn't seem to limit them that much. Now, it did seem to impact their ability to get off to a fast start. And what we saw was Oklahoma shot out of the gate, got a huge lead, and then they kind of sat on it a little bit in the second half. And Herbstreit made a good point. I thought it was kind of funny. He was like, with all the talk about trying to pick somebody for the Heisman, anybody really, just somebody take it. If you just turn the game on at the start of the second half, you'd think, okay, Mayfield blew up. And he really didn't. And it's interesting because the one time that he doesn't throw it 50 times and run it 20 times, and they do rely on Pirine and Mixon, which I know they've been banged up, but not running everything through Mayfield, they actually put up a ton of points on a pretty good defense. So the dynamics of this game were interesting. West Virginia really had that huge run into the third, early fourth. But honestly, for me, it was pretty much dominant throughout. I know the scoreboard showed it 41-28 at one point, but it was a domination, in my opinion, from Oklahoma. And really, the thought is, what are the playoff implications for this game? Because I feel like had West Virginia won this game, it was the Big 12's opportunity to really leapfrog some people in terms of West Virginia having a good win under their belt, but having a cleaner record than in Oklahoma, who might finish at 10-2, but obviously their two losses are out of conference, which really hurts them. So tell me what you think about that in terms of, would it have been better for the Big 12 in terms of playoff picture for West Virginia to win this game, or because Oklahoma won so big and because they've had some nice blowouts lately, can they get back into it just as easily as West Virginia could have been had they won?
Oh, I mean, that's a decent question, right? Are they better off? I mean, Oklahoma has some marquee wins, in that they have a win against West Virginia. So, wait, maybe there is no argument there, right? No, I honestly think it would probably be better off for West Virginia to be ranked higher. The reason is we've already seen Oklahoma get blown out by Ohio State. And before anybody jumps on this and says, "Well, you never know, the team's developed, etc." I'm not disputing that. I'm not ever saying that Oklahoma is necessarily the worst team. I'm just saying we have seen Ohio State blow out Oklahoma once this year. And when the playoff selection committee goes to put teams in the playoff, it's awfully hard to put Oklahoma with two losses ahead of a lot of other teams, when Oklahoma does have that, glaring loss on their resume that says, hey, you know, we can't stick with an Ohio State. We can't stick with a Houston. The only teams we can beat are in our own conference. West Virginia, had they won this game, has at least a solid argument to say, you don't know what we would do outside of our conference. We slipped up once, but otherwise we beat Oklahoma, who's the other sort of golden boy. So, if they'd beaten Oklahoma, you could say, well, we do better than Oklahoma did against Ohio State. And I'm going to jump back for a second and say one thing sort of in defense of West Virginia. And you said it's total domination for Oklahoma, and I do generally sort of agree. But, West Virginia fumbled away a lot of drives in this ball game. I mean, they
Yeah,
they
well,
fumble they
and
fumble the opener, and they punt a couple times, and they fumble two more drives. That put them in a huge hole. I mean, it's not like Oklahoma got up 28-0, and West Virginia was even really going 3-and-out. I mean, in those first four possessions, well, it was really first five possessions. West Virginia had fumbled away three of the five, including the opening punt. And on this one of the 3-and-out possessions, they throw two incomplete passes. And then the only other possession they punt on, again, they probably tried to passed on third down. But I mean, otherwise, there's a string there where Oklahoma's up 21-0, and I know they're up 21-0, but still, West Virginia had a 29-yard run, a 36-yard run, an incomplete pass, an 11-yard pass, and a fumble. They get the ball back, 11-yard run, 10-yard run, incomplete pass, 61-yard run, pass to the Oklahoma 3, fumble. So they're running or passing for 10 to 30 yards per play in this stretch where it probably could have been a 14-28 ball game, but instead they give away two possessions, they're down 28-0, and that really made it too hard to come back.
Well, I would counter that with two things. One, Oklahoma was playing in the same snowy, cold conditions, hard to hold on to a football sort of thing. And two, West Virginia could have held them to field goals. And that's my big thing when talking about teams who either give up a lot of yards or have a lot of bad situations happen in terms of field position, that you don't have to give up touchdowns every time. You can have some bad luck and give up 13 points, 17 points. But when you're staring at, I think it was 31-0 at one point, or 41-7 or whatever, part of that is really horrible red zone defense. Part of that is giving up a 75-yard touchdown. So for some of that, I agree. It's kind of like the Virginia Tech-Tennessee game where Virginia Tech probably could have won that game if they didn't fumble it away. But at the end of the day, people are going to see 56-28. And what they're also going to see is it got close to 41-28 when Oklahoma was trying to salt the game away. It got close to 41-28. And then when they needed to, they poured on a couple more touchdowns. So I agree with you from one aspect, but from the other, it's just hard to get behind any notion that West Virginia could win that game if they played in optimal conditions in any other scenario. It was at home. I mean, I think in terms of resume, I think this is going to go down as a blowout for Oklahoma.
No, I totally agree. And I was just noting when you say it was domination, I'm defending West Virginia a little bit to say they were certainly dominated on the scoreboard. And make no mistake, Oklahoma scored touchdowns on 5 of 7 possessions in the first half. And of the other 2, one of them was a fumble. So, and that
they did give up an alarming amount of yards, though. I will agree with you on that.
Yeah. All I'm really saying is, we talk a lot about per play sense. This was a game where the teams were both giving up massive amounts of yards. It's just West Virginia was continually not capitalizing on drives. Oklahoma capitalized on their drives for their yards, and they ended up putting up a lot of points very quickly. The idea that West Virginia's defense is the best in the Big 12, this was so bad, I think you have to really go back to the drawing board on that statement. I mean, they fell down quite a bit in the rankings now. They're only the 4th or 5th best rush defense statistically in the conference.
But at the end of the day, who hasn't given up 56 in the Big 12? K-State might be your only maybe argument for best defense in Big 12. I don't know. I haven't looked at every one of their games this year, but for me,
56 is a lot of points, though.
Yeah,
56 is a lot.
Oklahoma's given up 59. I mean,
well,
to a team that lost 63-10 to Iowa State Saturday. So I think it's one of those situations where it's completely fair to just say that there is no best defense in the Big 12 because there is no defense in the Big 12.
No, I'll totally buy that. I was just going into this game. There was this argument, right, that there was one good defense and it was West Virginia.
Yeah, no.
And now West Virginia looked exactly like every other defense in the Big 12. So I don't think we really. Yeah, I don't know that you can point to anybody and say they play good defense, to be honest, anymore.
So circling back to your point on Ohio State or Oklahoma, I think it's a good one, and I think it's something we've been harping on this year a lot, in that if you're building your strength completely relative to the rest of your conference and your entire resume is in conference, then we still don't know anything about you, because that's a round robin situation, back to your bag of wins, scenario where, Oklahoma has won a bunch of games, but against a bunch of teams who have lost to a bunch of people. So They did the same thing last year. They blew out a bunch of teams. They ran a bunch of teams out of the building, but I think they had a 1-point win over TCU late. They lost to Texas last year. And then what happens? They get blown out by Clemson. So the fact that they have 2 double-digit losses in their 3 out-of-conference games, to me, should disqualify them from the playoffs. And I don't care how great you're playing late, and that's another argument for Southern Cal. Like, Southern Cal's playing great late. So what? You lost to Utah. I mean, end of story. You shouldn't have lost to Utah and got blown out by Stanford. That's not even touching the 52-6. And the same thing with Oklahoma. You beat a bunch of teams in conference. Congratulations. Baylor does it every year and plays 3 high schools. You played at home an Ohio State team that beat you 45-24, and Ohio State couldn't score but 17 on Michigan State Saturday. And then you gave up, a double-digit loss where you tacked on a late touchdown against a Houston team that's been up and down all year. So I completely agree with you. I don't know if you're saying they shouldn't be in the playoffs or not, but I'm saying it. And I'm not being a homer because there are other teams in other conferences beside the SEC that I think should be ahead of Oklahoma in terms of playoff pecking order.
No, I mean, that's exactly what I'm saying. There's just no evidence that they could beat anybody in the playoff, and there's no mystery to it. It's kind of a double whammy. No one in the conference played very, very few major non-conference games, but the ones they did play, they lost.
Right, they were
Yeah,
they were 0-3. The conference was 0-3 against ranked teams, currently ranked teams non-conference. Part of that is bad to say that you have 0 ranked wins, but it's worse to say that you only played 3 ranked teams out of, I think I did the numbers. I mean, what is it? I think it was like 32 non-conference games had been played at this point, and they've only played 3 ranked teams. Come on, y'all, play somebody. But maybe we see why they don't.
yeah, yeah, maybe we do. I mean, and people will want to say, well, the playoff is great and it's wonderful. We have I know I have some strong opinions, at least on a lot of that, but I think you're also seeing the flip side, which is when all you really have to do is win your conference and get in, there's no real incentive for you to play too many ranked teams out of conference, because all it really does is give you the opportunity of a loss. Where if you play easy games and then you go, like West Virginia just beats Oklahoma, they have a decent shot of getting in the playoff, even though they had very, very little proof that they were better than anybody else. Oh, well, it'll be an interesting thing to watch moving forward.
And the last thing I'll say about this, to give Oklahoma a little bit of credit, I do think there are teams in the top 10, maybe even top 5 that they could beat. That's not the point. It's not just about who's the best team or playing the best ball in conference in November. It's about your entire resume. And as much as I do think they're probably a scary, tough out right now, and they might have an argument when a Michigan loses to an unranked Iowa, or a Clemson loses and almost loses to NC State, they might have an argument, but those teams have 1 loss, and those teams have ranked wins, and those teams that have out-of-conference ranked wins. So the resume is better, and I think that the playoff committee looks more at who you beat than they look at who you lost to. And in that sense, Oklahoma had a chance to beat 2 teams and lost to both of them. So it's a double whammy.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So I think that puts kind of a period on that game. It sort of worked out the way both of us expected.